Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 30. It's Saturday morning. We've got a guest, Mr. Matt Whitlock on the top there. What's going on, you guys?
Not too much. Last day work for me, ready for the baseball weekend.
That's right. That's right. So today we're going to do a couple of deep dives each. We're going to each give our top 5 minor league catchers, and if we have time, we're going to do some open forum questions. Coffee stories. Let's let the guest, Mr. Whitlock, start.
I have to start out?
Absolutely, you do.
Okay. Well, I have a Vermosa, the old Starbucks machine, and Starbucks started or stopped producing coffee for it. I guess they stopped it last year. Mm-hmm. You have to special order everything now, and it takes a while for it to get. So I'm doing pour over right now, and I go through it really fast, French roast, and I always load. I probably do it completely wrong. I've asked Aaron about it, but he says it's too long to explain how to do it right. So anyway, I run out of it fast. So I was up most of the night grading, and and ran out, and I forgot to order some. So I woke up in the morning about 3 hours later and had no coffee, and I needed coffee. So I went into the compost bin and got the got the used filter I used 3 hours ago and refilled it. So, and it was fine. I don't know. I just need the caffeine in the coffee. You guys are probably laughing because it's it's probably the worst thing to do, but I did it.
I respect,
and I got my coffee buzz.
I respect your honesty. That is really brave. And also, I just want to acknowledge I'm a shitty ass friend. I've yet to help make it better forever.
Is that like a complete coffee sin or what?
I just feel completely legitimately called out that I haven't helped you. He's like, you're right. I'll send you a recipe. I promise.
I'm crying. It's literally, it's not even really a sin. It's just ghetto. Like, yeah. I love it.
What makes me think of the day that you got on the pod, Tino, and you were like, you only had decaf, and you made it anyway. And like, yeah, you just looked so sleepy that entire episode. It was all that you had.
I literally thought, I was like, he's going to say that he grabbed like a handful of coffee beans and just ate them. Like, that's what I thought you were going to say. And you like literally took it further than where my imagination was. That's an amazing story.
Pour over is the theme of the day, as is maybe some poorly executed pour over. So my story is actually about my bride. And I caught her the other day. She was making a pour over. I got her a Keurig recently. I don't believe in Keurigs. I think they're trash, but I got her one for Mother's Day. So she's been using that, and I've been kind of needling her that she doesn't make real coffee anymore, and she just uses the K-Cup. So I noticed the other day she was getting the pour over. I'm like, oh, good for you. You're going to brew some coffee. And then I'm kind of looking around. She's not warming up any water. And then I hear the coffee going, and I look over. She's using this. So this is a electric water boil, like a kettle, but this is not a pour over kettle. She's like literally doing a pour over like this, and I had to bring the visual aid to show how ginormous this is. And just like she completely just was, I was like, what are you doing? We have a kettle. She's like, no, this is fine, I can control this. So I love her, but she was cutting a lot of corners in her quality. So she's lost her coffee card. I'm taking it away from her.
You guys are going to have to do a how to do a pour over next time.
We could do that. I could totally set it up down here.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm not following that. I have nothing. I'm flabbergasted at this point. I hope that's not the used ground coffee you're drinking there right now.
Oh no, this is fresh.
That's awesome. All right, let's dig in a little bit. I guess we'll go around and each do our hitter, and then we'll each do our pitcher. Matt, do you want to start us off with your hitter deep dive?
Sure. I did a little different deep dive. I tried to connect it with the prospects. One of the things I've been talking to both of you about, texting both of you about, is just trying to get a sense of filtering out minor league players and whether that's even possible, right? And also looking at how they've been evaluated in the past. One thing I respect about both Baseball Prospectus and Baseball America is they put their former evaluations out there, right? And even have charts of it and stuff. So, you know, everybody misses, right? Because it's so hard, and it's so hard. Why I'm doing this, it's so hard even more now because of 2020, and you have these players that are breaking out that really aren't necessarily breaking out. It's just we didn't necessarily have enough data on them and so forth. So anyway, I went back to a former catching prospect coming up, kind of getting on the boards in 2017. He was always a prospect before that as well, and that's Francisco Mejia. So in Baseball America 2017, he was 28 overall, number 1 in Cleveland. 2018, number 20 overall, number 1 in Cleveland. And then once he got traded to San Diego, he still maintained 32 overall and 4 in San Diego as far as prospect ranks go. And I think Prospectus had him even higher, especially in the 2017, 2018 range. But it's interesting to see what they said about them. So what they said about him. So Prospectus was initially, before 2017, a little weary. Don't fall too much in love with him. But then in 2017, it had comments like comment looking at its prior evaluation. So prior editions of the book have warned you not to fall in love with Mejia, a catcher who graduates rookie ball as a teenager. So he did come up without college. He was an early prospect coming in as a teenager. But pinning your affections on him is just too risky, is what they said in 2015. But they have a big however here. However, Mejia's 2016 season made it impossible for you not to love him. And in the process of doing so, look essentially away all risk involved in falling for him. The switch hitter showed more power than ever, continued to show off a strong arm behind the plate. That's the defensive stuff that's not necessarily relevant to us, but put together a 50-game hitting streak. He might not be in Cleveland for a while yet, but go ahead and buy a Valentine's Day card for him. Nice. And it will get better and better as far as the evaluations. Even when he's in San Diego, Prospectus says Mejia is practically the first name below the can't miss tier. So kind of in between there, but he did have the numbers in the minors. He did have the scouting, kind of the scouting profile and so forth. But it is interesting to look at his metrics now that he is up in 2022. So he's had 726 potential at bats. This is what's interesting. His career EV is 86.7, average EV. His high EV is 109.6. His launch is good, 15.5 career, 3.9% barrel. So that says something. In 28% hard hit, his contact has maintained, and we know that with minor leaguers, that's something that's always maintained. 78% contact rate. And as far as the counting numbers, and then the OPS, 20 home runs, 81 RBIs, and 726 potential at bats, 689 OPS. So and he's switch hitters, so I did check out his splits. His OPS is pretty consistent, 688 versus right-handed pitching, 691 versus lefty. The only difference is he has 15 home runs versus right-handed pitching, and I believe that's why when he tends to play versus right-handed pitching in Tampa right now. I haven't confirmed that, but that's when I had him as a player, that's what seemed to be the pattern. So it is interesting as far as the why. For me, one of the big whys is he did have the contact rate all along, but the exit velocity and hard hit was always questionable there, and it seems that one of the indicators that people will point out to as far as finding great players is the coupling of high exit velocity with high contact rates. So it makes me suspicious of minor league players, especially in looking at this more closely the last 6 months of ones that tend to have lower hard contact with higher contact rates with lower EV without the OPS to support it. So Adley's an example of somebody that had a lower hard contact, excellent contact rates, but he had a high OPS. So Quan is another an instance of a non-catcher that had those indicators that are similar with low EVs that right now has the same type of issue in the majors as far as quality of contact, but is making good contact, but lower OPS.
That was great. I think one of the things that at first glance I saw was he was a 300 hitter in the minors, right? Mm-hmm. And then we were waiting for his power to come around. So in rookie ball, he hit 305. In 16, between A and high A, he hit 347 and 333. In double A, he hit 297. This was when he was getting really pumped up, right? And then San Diego, triple A, he hit 328. And then I scroll down and I see his launch angle in 17 and in 18 were 5.7 degrees and 8.8 degrees. And then in 19, it was 19.7 degrees. So it jumped over 10 degrees. Mm-hmm. In 20, it was 23.4 degrees. And then last year it was 14.9. And it looks like Tampa's trying to bring it back down because this year it's 8.2.
Yeah.
So what's, he's 5'8", and 188 pounds listed. Mm-hmm. I think this is a theme that I'm seeing with a lot of players, and it'll actually come up in the player that I'm going to do my deep dive with, which is you're trying to turn everyone into a home run hitter, right? Because that's the age that we're in. And some guys just, their swings or their approach is just not cut out for it. So in some ways, I'm going to assume that organizations pushed on Mejia to change, right? That the Padres said, we want you to try to hit home runs, try swinging this way. And it's the peanut butter approach where, it's like what I always harp on the Pirates for trying to teach everybody how to throw a two-seam when that's not the right pitch for them. And it seems like that's what happened to Mejia. I wouldn't be surprised to see Mejia come back as a 300 hitter at some point in his career if he goes back to trying to do what he used to do. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Aaron?
I would push back on that. I mean, I question whether he has the plate approach to really ever get too much power and to therefore much average, because I think in the majors, it's not just put bat to ball, it's quality contact with velocity. It's going to get base hits. His walk rate this year is 1.1%. Mm-hmm. He traditionally has been someone who wasn't very selective, but again, had the back control. Look at his scouting grades on his back control. And that's what made us believe maybe he could be a 300 hitter. I was encouraged after last year. He struck out less than 20% of the time, walked 6%, and had a 156 ISO. It was posted a 260, 322, 416, and 108 WRC plus. And I, like you, thought, okay, Tampa's tapped into what talent he has left, but this year he's just completely backslid. To the point of he's 225, 231, 360 with a 69 WRC plus. As Matt said, he's on the small side of the platoon with, with the Zanino. I just question if he's ever going to fulfill. I mean, at this point, I would put my money on he's not going to fulfill that basketball.
And one of the things in defense, which we see players calling for, you saw Harper blast Girardi about not playing Stott every day, and that young players need to play every day. One in defense of Mejia, he's never really gotten he's playing every day, no matter what type of approach from a team. But the other thing I want to point out in preview of who I'm going to do deep dive with pitcher is in 2017, Mejia was 28 overall in Baseball America. 2017, 97 overall is Dylan Cease. So I look at stuff like that, and then I look at today's prospect board in Baseball America and say, you know, these players that are towards the end in the 90s to 100s could always turn into somebody that is quite a burgeoning star like Cease, versus somebody who could be in the top 20, and just trying to find that discernment, that filter in prospecting these guys.
I also appreciate that you highlight like his lack of hard contact, even when he was getting more helium and we were calling him as a future star. Even then, he wasn't impacting the ball in a way that would portend, the quality of contact that would help him get to that tool, that carrying tool he had with the hit tool.
I completely disagree. I don't think that hard hit and quality of contact equates to, I agree that I don't think he's going to see power, but I don't think that quality of contact means high average. I think that it can, but I don't think that it necessarily, if you have back control, if you're able to Tony Gwynn never hit the ball hard. Wade Boggs never hit the ball hard, right? We have this long list of high average players in Major League history that didn't hit the ball hard. And so, I looked up.
I really know that though. We don't have any data on that.
Yeah, I do. I watch games a lot. Absolutely, I do. I just looked up Luis Ariz as the first one that came to mind for me. And his career averages are 334, 321, 294, and 360. The one thing that is different about him versus Mejia is he walks a bit more than Mejia has historically, but his average exit for 2022 is 51st percentile. His max is 35th, and his hard hit is 7th, and his barrel is 10th. Mm-hmm. And so I think those players exist. I think it's easier to predict if we're looking to try to predict who's going to be good. I think it's easier or it's smarter to gravitate towards the players that do hit the ball hard or are showing high quality of contact, and that's a very good indicator. But I don't think it's exclusive, right? I don't think that high average hitters exclusively hit the ball hard. I think there are different types of high average hitters, and that Mejia, a player like Mejia, has the potential with bat control to be a high average hitter without having to hit the ball hard. He just can't hit it in the air, right? So I guess that's my pushback is that I think that high average hitters come in all different shapes and sizes, and you don't have to hit the ball hard. You have to place the ball in the right place in order to get a base hit. So we'll take a quick break.
And that's the case with, I would agree when it comes to batting average and hit, and that's for spray charts and are helpful as far as understanding how well they're able to place, as far as, even Tony Gwynn, where he would call to his other players and say where he's going to hit it in his next at bat is incredible, right? Mm-hmm. But I think in the case of fantasy baseball, I think EV and hard hit is very essential in prospecting, because you're looking for the player that is going to be elite and cover all categories.
Right. So let's take a quick break and we'll come back with Aaron's hitter. Mr. Alvis, who's your hitter?
So I wanted to bring up Alejandro Kirk on the point of catchers today. Mm-hmm. And in my effort to rejoin our meeting, I lost my page. So I will try to speak to this the best I can. So the reason I came to Kirk was I was looking at rolling averages for xwOBA. Savant has a tool where you can look at the last 250, 150 plate appearance windows and see who's trending up and down for xwOBA. The reason I value xwOBA is because it's a blend of the quality of contact, the angles, as well as sprint speed, and incorporates also walks. It values all types of on base equally. And so I think it's an interesting stat. And Alejandro Kirk was someone that popped on the 100 plate appearance as well as the 50 plate appearances, someone who's trending way up. And that surprised me because we roster Kirk in our draft and hold team, and we actually replaced him in mid-April once Merville was promoted in Kansas City. We've been playing him as our catcher too, and we benched Alejandro Kirk. we have Will Smith as our catcher one in that league. And the reason that we benched Kirk was he really wasn't hitting for any power. And so it really surprised me, honestly. I've been kind of sleeping on him since that time, being a little disappointed in him earlier on. And I've missed basically what he's been doing. So to date, he's played 74% of the Blue Jays games, 29 at catcher and 13 at DH. Early on in the year, he was hitting in the 6 to 8 range in the lineup. This month, he's moved all the way up to 5th based on his performance. So season to date, all told, he's 327, 407, 484 with a 157 ISO and a 155 WRC plus. He's walking more than he's striking out at a rate of 11.9% walk rate and only 9% K rate. So going into season in that sort of cluster in that 8 to 11 range with Stevenson, Ruiz, Ruchman, these sort of lower to mid power, but high batting average type assets for your team. And that's kind of how I saw Kirk, as kind of an average, positive team productive environment. And he really wasn't delivering on the power. And that's why we drifted away from him. But his rolling month averages, so in April, like I said, he got off to a really slow start, was slugging 245, 584 OPS. Then in May, he slugged 569 with a 984 OPS. And then in June, he's slashing 714 slug with a 1229 OPS so far. He still only has 5 home runs, but his playing time is really cemented. Again, he's appeared at 29 games at DH, or 29 at catcher and 13 at DH. Just great plate skills. His launch angle is a little bit suboptimal. But yeah, he's just, his stat page is basically all red. And he's doing everything that we value from a fantasy point. And like I say, he's moved up to 5th in the order. So he looks to be a tremendous catcher asset moving forward. And would look to maybe get him back in our lineup.
And he's a really fun watch.
Mm-hmm.
A really, really fun watch.
He's one of those guys coming up that really wasn't playing every day, and I always wondered, well, what happens when he gets his shot and he's in that lineup every day? And it's fun to see him produce.
What do you guys think about with Moreno coming up? What do you think they're going to do with that position and those two players as far as playing time goes?
Go ahead, Matt.
I haven't looked into it too much. That's kind of been the instance of kind of shock for me when it comes to Moreno coming up. Where is he going to play, and how are they going to work that out with the 3 catchers there? So that remains to be seen for me. Yeah. So
I mean, to me, with Jansen's latest injury, he clearly has playing time in the short term. They could have brought in Zach Collins as well. But they brought Moreno up. Kirk has 177 plate appearances. Jansen has 62, and Zach Collins has 73 thus far. All 3 of their catchers have posted a WRC plus. And honestly, Danny Jansen had more in my attention than Kirk. He had a 152 WRC plus, but has 7 home runs. And I was just kind of glossed over, missed what Kirk was doing because Jansen is kind of broken out this year. But he's hurt again, and that's why he only has 72 plate appearances thus far, even though he's performed really well. So, it might be a Royce Lewis type situation where he comes up, to spell while Jansen's hurt. Mm-hmm. And if he proves he belongs, they've maybe found a place for him. But to your point, Tino, once Jansen's healthy, the way he's hitting, if Moreno isn't tearing the cover off the ball, how does he not go back down? At least that's the way it looks to me.
Right. Well, Jansen's never had he's had 1 season over, or he's had 3 seasons over 100 at-bats, but it's been 384, or plate appearances, 384 in 19, 205 in 21, and 147 in 2020. So he's never been healthy. He also, interestingly, I looked up, he's arbitration eligible in 2023. And so if they believe Kirk and Moreno can share catching duties and find enough at-bats, I wouldn't be surprised to see them flip Jansen for somebody for, some pitching and during the offseason. But I do think that might drive Jansen's playing time this year in order to maintain that value, but we'll see. Awesome. I love that you did Kirk. I love him because he's Mexican, two, he's shaped like a gumdrop, and he's just kind of a unique, fun player to watch. Super cool. So my batter or hitter deep dive was Corey Seager. Corey Seager's been a topic of our text thread, and we kind of were discussing what kind of player he is and what's happened to him. And anytime there's a what's happened to him question, I want to do a deep dive on that player to understand why. Little history on Corey Seager. Signed a big deal with the Rangers this offseason. Previously played with the Dodgers, 6'4", 215, 28 years old. Drafted 18th overall by the Dodgers in 2012. So far in 22 with the Rangers, he has in 237 plate appearances, his triple slash is 223, 291, 405 with 11 homers, 26 runs, 25 ribbies, and 2 steals. He's running an 8.4% walk rate and a 17.7% K rate, neither of which is great or weird. So no evidence yet. 227 BABIP, which is obviously lower than league average. But one of the causes of that is that it looks to me as if he's trying to become a 40 home run hitter instead of the 300 hitter that I think has made him a very good, but not elite player up to this point in time. His launch angle this year is 15.7 degrees, which is higher than it's ever been. And his ground ball rate is 36.2%, which is the lowest of his career. Last year, for comparison, his ground ball rate was 45.9%. His fly ball rate is also higher than it's ever been. His O swing is highest of his career. His swing percentage is second highest of his career. His contact is second lowest, and his swinging strike rate is 13.9%. What does all this mean? Clearly, he's trying to launch the ball. He's trying to hit the ball in the air. That much is clear. He's trying to do it in one of the most pitcher-friendly parks in baseball, in Texas. And he's trying to do it at a time when we believe that the ball has been completely deadened, whether it's because of the humidor or the makeup of the ball. We know that power has been down. So it could be bad timing. It could be him pressing to live up to the contract that he signed, but he's clearly not playing, I think, to his skills, or is that he's adapted his swing in a way that doesn't take advantage of his full talent. To his credit, based on the Savant page, his average exit is in the 82nd percentile, max exit 75th, hard hit 80th. But I also wonder, and I ask you guys this, just real quickly, like 30 seconds, do either of you at first glance view Corey Seager as a superstar? Or
I see him as an all-star, but not a superstar. I see him as a 5 to 10 range rank as a shortstop.
Fantasy wise or real life?
Fantasy wise.
Okay.
I would love to have him on my team real life besides the injury history, but fantasy wise, 5 to 10 range, all-star.
How about you, Aaron?
I would say the same.
Okay.
I think what he does well isn't valued, or what he has historically done well are not things that make superstars.
Got it. Like what? I guess what are some examples of that?
Batting average.
Okay. So I did a little exercise, and I won't share the whole thing, but my exercise was to cherry pick the highest or the best season he's had at each category and put them together as a real season. And so if you took the best season for each category for Corey Seager, it would be 687 plate appearances and a 308, 394, 585 triple slash for 979 OPS, which is great. That is superstar level. 26 homers, 105 runs, 87 RBIs, and 4 steals. The exercise that I did was I took that as a full season. And since we're at about the 30% mark for the major league season, I multiplied the stats of shortstops by 3 as a multiplier to come out with an equivalent season. And what I found was I would take Trey Turner for sure over him. I would take Jazz Chisholm for sure. I would take Trevor Story for sure. I would consider taking Bobby Witt Jr. and I would consider taking Tim Anderson over the dream season of Corey Seager's history. And part of why is because he doesn't steal bags. His highest stolen base season was 4 steals. I rated him, truth be told, I rated him, I think, number 4 coming into the season because I valued the hit tool and I thought the hit tool would translate better. I didn't realize he was going to make the swing adjustment. So Corey Seager, to me, if he just goes back to what he's done historically, is a 300, 375, 500 hitter that if healthy is hitting about 20 home runs. He's only been healthy for 3 full seasons in his career. And so my write-up, what I said was this year he's trying hard to hit home runs in a big ass park. That's not who he is he's trying to live up to his contract with home runs. He's unlucky, yes, but he's also hitting the ball more in the air more than ever. Have to admit what he is. He's a clutch, good hitter, but not a superstar. But in the playoffs, he'd play as a superstar if the Rangers ever made it. So I'd like to see Seager go back to trying to hit line drives and just be who he is and not worry about hitting home runs nearly as much. You guys have any further thoughts on Corey Seager? Or anything interesting you found while looking?
I think what sticks out to me and looking at Savant pages you were going over, what you learned about him is just how much, how good his expected stats are, and how consistently good they are year over year. But ultimately, it comes down to results. The other thing that I've thinking out loud in my head, I guess it's not out loud, it's in my head, is if they ban the shift, to me, someone like Corey is going to see a huge bump. For
sure. I do get back to, I think what you said a couple podcasts ago was actually really, really sharp and smart when we talked about expected stats being really off this year and not calibrated based on conditions. Yeah. And I think Seager is a really good example of that. He's someone who's hitting the ball hard and he's hitting the ball in the air more than he ever has. And so his X stats look great. But the reality is that his stats don't, because X stats haven't necessarily caught up to what's actually going on. And I've actually, because of your comment, I started looking a little more, and I've eliminated the X stats from my evaluations currently until we get to a place where they seem like they make more sense. I think that was a very astute comment that you made a couple pods ago.
No, in fairness, it was Eno has done so much stuff about the ball, and just following his work about the baseball with the humidor this year, and how the X stats have to normalize before they can add a lot of weight. But
right. Do we want to do pitchers, or do we want to move on to the top 5 catching minor leaguers for the sake of time?
I'd like to mention my pitcher. I did a lot to work on him more so than I did my catcher. So I would, anything we can get my catchers, and we can talk about the pitcher I want to highlight. Because my catcher analysis is just shit compared to the pitcher.
Let's go. Let's do it. As long as you have time, let's do it.
Okay, so the pitcher I'm going to highlight is Logan Webb. The reason I wanted to highlight Logan is, just released his updated pitcher ranks for rest of season. Logan Webb, and it made me think about Logan Webb because he was valued so highly coming into this season and redraft. And I think a lot of that was the playoff tax, way he performed in the playoffs last year was, and the way he finished the season was really fantastic. What I found was very marginal. There were no big shifts that I can point to that to explain why he is performing the way he is so far. I did find a few things, but I leave it to you guys and anyone who listens to decide if you think this is the answer. But so far this year, through 12 starts, he's 71 innings, 59 strikeouts. Right? Let me say that again: 71 innings, 59 strikeouts. 3.77 ERA and a 1.19 WHIP. Last year, he made 26 starts, 148 innings, 158 strikeouts, a 3 ERA with a 1.1 WHIP. His stuff plus last year finished 105.3, a 109.7, and this year it's down to 105.3. Location plus is the same. The pitching plus is actually better this year than it was last year. which says to me maybe some of the adjustments that he's made is to maybe adjust against left-handers, because Pitching Plus, one of the things it does is it looks at splits. So the fact that some of his pitches are a little bit different and his mix is a little bit different, it makes you wonder if he's trying to be more effective against left-handers. But overall, it's pretty close. So his 21, like I said, he started out the year in April with a 4 ERA with a 1.5 WHIP. And he just got progressively better. His ERA continued to drop, highlighted by the month of August, where he had a 1.41 ERA, 0.97 WHIP, and 41 strikeouts in 30 innings. And like I said, we all saw what he did in the playoffs. So he got better and better last year. His sinker was really his money pitch, keeping the ball on the ground. And he was able to get some decent swings and misses off the four seam because of that. Year over year, there's really no difference in his BABIP and his home run to fly ball rate. His pitch movements are basically the same. The heat maps, if you look at them side by side, where he's placing his pitches is basically the same. The two minor changes I saw is his slider. The slider is moving, the movement on it compared to himself is very small. However, compared to league average, it's went from 10% better than league average to just 2%. So while his slider isn't necessarily moving any less, the average MLB slider is moving more than his, if that makes any sense.
Horizontally, right?
Yes, horizontally. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about, because as we move towards more and more breaking pitches and less fastballs, hitters are accustomed to seeing that. And so again, it's not necessarily that his slider is less in terms of shape and movement. It's not markedly different, but it's less different than the field of pitchers. And because of that, his swinging strike rate on his slider has dropped to 27.9%. Last year, it was 47.1. Mm-hmm. So it's dropped 20%, 20% less swings and misses on that pitch. And that could explain maybe his drop in strikeouts. The other thing that's interesting is his pitch mix. Last year, as I said, his pitch mix was dominated by his sinker. He threw that 37.8% of the time. And his slider and change, he threw in the 25 to 27% range. And he also throws a four seam just about 10%. This year, he's brought up the changeup and slider almost at the same point as the sinker. So he's still throwing his sinker just about as much, but he's brought the other two more level. So instead of being sinker heavy, it's kind of a 3-pitch mix pretty equally across the board. And he's throwing the four seam a little bit less. And again, I'm wondering if he's doing that to try to battle platoon splits. But either way, he's throwing that changeup and slider a little bit more often. And then his fastball is down slightly in velocity from 93.2 to 92.6. It's not terribly concerning. But his swing and misses went from 21% to 16%. And I would wonder if that is a throwing the sinker less and changing the eye move, if it's less effective for him to come back up in the zone with the four seam. Because if you look at his heat map, he throws the four seam exclusively at the top of the zone, which makes tons of sense because he's got that slider working at the lower. That's his best pitch. Comes in with the four seam to change the eye level. I'm wondering if as he's throwing the sinker less, if that tactic is maybe less effective for him, and it's reducing the amount of swings and misses he's getting on the four seam. These are very subtle changes. I think overall, a 3.7 ERA and a 1.19 WHIP and 5 wins from a starter is pretty good. Nothing. I would certainly want him on my roster in my pitching rotation. I wouldn't sell, and I would, if anyone was willing to or wanted to sell based on his preseason draft stock, I certainly would. But yeah, these very subtle changes in his mix are getting some very different results fantasy wise compared to how he was thought of in the preseason. So again, I don't know if any of those things are light bulbs of like, hey, this is what's going on. But it was just really interesting to see some very subtle shifts and very different results than what was expected from him early this year.
I love that. I think that was a really awesome eval. We've had our Logan Webb history here, and I appreciate a lot of really great material there. The one other thought I had while listening and looking at his Savant page is, I think you're absolutely right that, you know, his sinker has gone down about 0.8 miles an hour, and the vertical movement has increased because of it. But my thought is pretty simple. If he's throwing sinker changeup slider, and you look at the heat map and everything is in like the lower third of the strike zone, hitters, if they can peg where the pitch is going to be, it's not that difficult to hit, right? I think location wise, like if you can narrow it down to the lower third, then you can hit most anything as a major leaguer. Throwing his four seam, even throwing it 9% or 10% last year, changes the eye level, as you said. And so his sinker last year surrendered a 276 average and a 392 slug. His sinker this year is surrendering a 388 average and a 525 slug. And I really do think it's yes, I think that hitters adjusting to the slider and slider movement makes a lot of sense. That was a great point. I also think if they can just focus on the bottom of the strike zone without the threat of a four seam, then they're able to hit the sinker all day long. So as you said, sinker was probably not his best strikeout pitch, obviously, but maybe his most effective pitch last year that he threw 38% of the time. And this year it's getting hit hard. So again, as simple as change the eye level a little bit. And I think the effectiveness of the sinker will maybe not get to the point it was last year, but will become a much more effective pitch with just a little bit of four-seam fastball, as ineffective as the pitch might be.
This is a little bit narrative, and it just occurred to me when you were talking and thinking about a sinker, you know, if someone keeps the ball on the ground, the Giants defense has been less than stellar thus far. And
100%.
About, you know, the confidence of a pitcher, how that might play into their mindset.
Think about it's Tyro Estrada, who's an offensive infielder. It's Wilmer Flores, who really is like a traffic cone out there essentially. And 37-year-old Brandon Crawford, who's lost a ton of range. And then Crawford's been hurt, so they've been playing other people at short as well. Donovan Walton, who's a ex-Mariner farmhand who shouldn't be a major leaguer. So yeah, I think and Belt's been hurt too, and Belt's a above average first baseman. So I think your point is well taken. I love this. I kind of live for that kind of evaluation. That was an awesome job.
Thanks
for that, Aaron.
Yeah.
Matt?
I have nothing to add. Left me speechless.
How about your Dylan Cease stuff?
Well, you all have covered him quite a bit, so I don't want to be repetitive here, but I'll just add a couple of things in contrast to Mejia, and just in looking at prospects and learning from this. In 2016, prospectus, and this is the year he went. So he was drafted in 2014. He was number 77 overall in the draft rankings. He ended up being drafted in the 6th round, 169 overall, largely because of injury. The biggest concern with him was not his MPH stuff, but number one is injury, and number two is control. So prospectus in 2016 said, and again with the corny punning off his name, Dylan Cease needs either a comma or better command of his high 90s heat, right? But you'll see in 2017, this is the same year Mejia was really high. He was 97 overall, number 4 with the Cubs. It is interesting that he came over in the Quintana trade with Eloy Jimenez. But again, you'll find the same type of comments. Great stuff. He had Tommy John surgery, the injury, but the command is an issue. So what I'm looking at now in 2022 and looking at the prospect ranks, looking at how they're evaluated, are these type of pitchers that have great stuff, but may have been overlooked because of injury or because of the question, can they harness their control? So like the DL Halls, right? Great stuff, but can he harness that control? Harrison is a wonderful example last year. The biggest critique of Harrison is that can he harness his control, right? And this year he has. And I think a common theme with Cease and Harrison is the Giants system. So Cease is affected by Ethan Katz coming over from the Giants as the White Sox pitching coach. And I think that's been quite a change. So with these type of players, what I'm starting to look for is the system they're in, right? And so with DL Hall, well, what is Baltimore doing? What is their philosophy? I know they've changed it. They're very cautious about the innings in the work of their minor leaguers, including G-Rod. So kind of the lesson learned for me here is find, pitchers are always more difficult to really have a consistent find in the minors as they head into the majors. But looking at these type of pitchers that may be kind of overlooked towards the end of the rankings, not these high up G-Rod or Boz's that are way high, and trying to find these pitchers that have great stuff but just haven't harnessed it yet.
I love it. And thank you, Dylan Cease, for helping out our TGFBI team this year. It's been a big boon.
89 strikeouts in 63 innings.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
By the way, shout out, our team is now 3rd overall out of 465, in case anybody was wondering. Not that you are.
We had a seven home run day yesterday.
Right. That's right. So my pitcher is, the theme for me is what happened to this player today. My pitcher was Noah Syndergaard, 6'6", 242, signed with the Angels this year, coming off of Tommy John surgery in March of 2020, drafted 38th overall by the Blue Jays in 2010. Currently, this season, 46 in the 3rd innings, 45 hits, 10 walks, 30 Ks, a 3.69 ERA, 1.198 WHIP, and a 3.81 xFIP. He struck out 15.4% of batters faced, walked 5.1%. His last 2 full seasons in 18 and 19, his K rate was 24%. So his K rate is down about 8.5% from the last time we saw him pitch a full season. 277 BABIP, left on base of 70.6. So all those things are they're pretty normal. His left on base is a little low, but for the most part, those stats are pretty normal. 48% ground ball rate, same as earlier in his career, 18 to 19. Swinging strike rate this year of 10.4% and a CSW of 28.1%. His contact rate is way up, almost 80% this year. For his career, he's a 74% contact rate guy, and swinging strike rate for his career has been 13%. So that's down about 2.5%. Basically what I found is that Noah Syndergaard, who we think of as Thor, big power pitcher, 100 miles an hour, 92 mile an hour slider, incredibly intimidating on the mound, is now a contact and control pitcher. His fastball in 16 was average 98.7. This year it averages 94. So his average fastball is, even over 2018, it's down about 3.5 miles an hour. Has a lot more vertical movement. So this year has 7 inches more vertical movement than it did in 18. His slider is now an 84 mile an hour slider. In 18, it was a 92 mile an hour slider. He does have 14 inches more vertical movement and 3 inches more horizontal movement than he did in 18, but that's expected with the such a decrease in velocity. And his sinker is down 3.2 miles an hour over 2018 as well, with more movement. So he's become a finesse pitcher who is lacking strikeouts. And we don't know if he's still coming back from his Tommy John surgery. It was over 2 years ago, and I don't know what the research says about velocity coming back that far after surgery. But if this is who he is, in my mind, he's a real life number 4 and maybe a number 3 if he gets a little velo back. Fantasy wise, he's a back end starter with the lack of strikeouts. 30 strikeouts in 45 innings is not great from a starting pitcher. So it's so interesting to have this almost mythical figure and who was, such an intimidating presence for the Mets the long flowing hair and, huge, like Adonis figure on the mound, barking at hitters to be, kind of having his superpowers taken away. And now he's forced to, I think, just not learn how to pitch, because I think he was a little underrated as far as his pitchability, but he really has to lean on almost on guile at this point. Not quite to the Dylan Bundy place, but all the numbers that I found in researching supported, what I think we all see when he's on the mound for the Angels, which is just not quite the same pitcher as he once was. You guys have any thoughts on Noah Syndergaard?
Kind of theme of the day, if he was with Minnesota or Tampa, I would want to be buying him. Because while the velocity is down, throwing at this velocity might allow him to stay on the field. And that's been elusive for him.
It's a good point.
And when I see that is enough velocity and his mix is deep enough and he has good command, that if he was in the hands of a pitching development team, like the ones I mentioned, I would want to buy. Because I think they could mold someone of this talent and with this mix into someone who could get more strikeouts, at least league average strikeouts. But there's no doubt that swing and miss is missing right now. There's no doubt he's adjusting to throwing a lower velocity. Throwing his slider was his number one used pitch. When he was the player that you mentioned, he led with his slider. That was the one he used the most, and it was pretty unhittable with that velocity. The harder you throw a slider, the harder it is to hit. And that was his mainly used pitch. So, and when he was returning from his slew of injuries, the breaking pitches were one of the last things he started to throw, because a lot of it was believed that was what caused him some of his health problems. Not just throwing that hard, but throwing breaking pitches that hard. So
92 mile an hour slider is going to not be good for your arm.
Those are my thoughts right now. Good breakdown.
His savant ranks that for this year's stats, he's 12th percentile for Ks, 24th percentile for whiff, and 49th percentile for chase. And those just aren't, those aren't Noah Syndergaard numbers, right? Those are Marco Gonzalez numbers. And it's just, it's to me, it's kind of sad. I do think that he is a good, as you pointed out, he would be great in a different or a different pitcher in a different organization. But, and I've never loved him as a pitcher, but it is still sad to see a pitcher not be able to do what he used to be able to do. It's at this age.
Nice little riff there on Thor losing his superpowers.
So I also wrote, thank you. I also wrote the last sentence in my write-up is, however, he's not Thor anymore. More like no dash, and then a question mark at the end.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, and I have just my comment. I have zero confidence in California, Anaheim, or whatever they're called these days. They, in their player development, either at the minors level or at majors.
I second that. Take another quick break and come back with our top 5 Monos catchers. Top 5 minor league catchy or fantasy catchers. We're each going to give our top 5 list and have a little debate here. Matt, why don't you start us off? Actually, why don't you start us off just with your number 5?
Just with my number 5. Okay. And just context here, 2 things. I have 4 tiers here out of the 5. And secondly, with context, this is very fantasy baseball oriented, especially with catchers. So the filter here is a catcher that's going to play often, that's going to hit at least 4 out of the 5 categories. And that's very important when it comes to my comments on Moreno. So I have Davis as number 5. Just recently came to AA. I'm going very much off the qualitative research here from scouts as far as what he can become, the amount of torque he could generate with his swing, which is somewhat unorthodox. But his OPS has been solid throughout. He's a good hitter. Hard hit is lower, but again, What do we do with that as far as in relation to OPS and potential with power? K to walk, 18% K, which is great in A plus. Walk is 8%, contact 78. I'll be interested what happens when he does make that transition to high A plus to double A, which has just recently happened. What's going to happen there? And then this has been, and we've mentioned this in text, it's always been double A has always been kind of the test place, right, as far as a player moving up. But most scouts are saying this is very much increased since 2020 as far as the talent level at AA is really at a peak right now, and it's really the testing place on is the player going to adjust? Where's the player at now? So I'm curious to see what's going to happen in AA with Davis and whether he'll meet the pedigree that scouts talk about.
What is your kind of your expectation of him in a normal season at the major league level, and where would you rank him as far as major league fantasy catchers once he does come up?
I think he's on that. He's kind of at that Will Smith level where, can he be elite? Or is he going to be kind of the all-star once in a while catcher? So I'm undecided. I don't want to give any big comps right now until I see him in AA. I think that the difference maybe between me 6 months ago and me today, as far as just learning prospects, is and Aaron talked about this, I think, on a pod and on our text, and I'm more convinced about this than ever, is the proximity thing. The proximity as far as meeting the test of time, but I also want to trust the qualitative piece of scouts here. So I could see him, 270, 25 to 30 home runs at peak. So that's where I would place him.
Aaron, do you have any thoughts on Henry Davis, and where'd you have him ranked if you did?
I did. I had him as my number one. Speaking on the proximity first, him being in AA, the Pirates having so much opportunity on their team. The fact that he has a hose for an arm, and we're potentially moving towards automated strike zone in the next couple of years, catchers who can, the defensive element was going to be not negated, but it's going to be lessened, and players who really have a strong throwing arm are going to be more valued. So I think that would help him. But I love what I've seen so far in the minors, and I love his 70 raw and 70 game power. I think from the catching position, you're looking for categorical impact, and whether that be batting average or power. I respect, I'll give all credence to Matt's projections. I don't know if based on my limited knowledge that he would ever hit 270, but I could see him being like a 230 guy. I worry a little bit about his walk rate. He's only walking 8.6% of the time this year. And when someone is selective to get to that power, so that they're waiting for their pitch and they can't be easily gotten out. But I am encouraged by what he's the fact that he is in AA, because the pitching right now in AA is harder than AAA. At least that's what the stats suggest.
I think he also is, they're waiting on him to be one of the three faces of the franchise in Pittsburgh, right? It's Brian Hayes, O'Neill Cruz, and Henry Davis. And the fact that he was drafted 1-1 is going to help him get playing time, quite frankly. They're going to be inclined to want to see him succeed. I have a little higher project. He's my number 4, interestingly. I guess maybe this is our expectations of the position moving forward, but he's my number 4. But I see him as, at peak, he could be, if his hit tool gets there, he could be an 850 OPS catcher, hitting in the middle of that lineup with RBIs. And he has the kind of power, as you stated, to hit 35 home runs even. if he's able to have enough plate appearances. My statistical comp for Henry Davis, it was Javi Lopez, old catcher for the Braves. Because again, he's not going to walk a ton, but he is going to hit for power. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how his unorthodox swing translates. And I think, Aaron, that's a very good point that applies to all the catchers now, is if the automated strike zone is going to be a thing, we very much have to change how we look at potential playing time for catchers, because not that you could put anybody back there, but if you got an arm and you can block, that's what's going to matter. And so the Jose Treviños of the world are not going to play nearly as much. Aaron, who is your number 5?
My number 5 was Henry Ford.
Mm-hmm. You want to expand on him?
He's really far away. I was tossing up between him and Bo Naylor, who's in the Guardian system. I really like Naylor. He's walking at a 21% rate right now in AA, and his hard hit rate is 38.6%. When I think about the Guardians and their ability to develop, hitters who see the strike zone well, hit for high average, and he's actually has a little bit of speed. I don't think he would be, I'm not suggesting he would be a Varsho or anything like that, but I don't think he's a 0. So again, thinking about categorical impact, if you get a player in a system like Cleveland, where there is opportunity to play, is a good enough athlete to run a little bit, has that kind of eye at the plate, and there is playing opportunity. He's not an exciting ceiling prospect, but I think he has enough categorical juice that he could be interesting and in fantasy. But ultimately in fantasy, I had Harry Ford higher because he's way far away. Honestly, I don't know if I would invest in either one of these guys as a keeper right now, but to me, if I was, Harry Ford would have that higher ceiling. He was 11th overall pick. He can play 3 or 4 different positions. He's struggling, but that's not to be unexpected. Early on, he's just starting his first full season ball, but he has potentially 5 tools. And at the catcher position, that's really intriguing, and really is a really good athlete. So he was my number 5.
Did you have Harry Ford ranked, Matt?
I would have him close to 6.
Okay.
I've always been high on Ford, and like what we said earlier, he's going to be that type of catcher that will always have the catcher eligibility and be able to move around with positions, and so you get a lot of at bats from him. Mm-hmm. But again, why I would put him at 6 is just this is the proximity issue.
Right.
I want to see more.
Yeah.
So,
I really struggle with that, like weighing the fact that Naylor's in AA and then that Ford has such a high ceiling.
Ford was my number 3. Here's why. I think that, so all the points that you guys made, he's got 60 raw, 60 speed, but he is the type of player that will continue to maintain catcher eligibility if we have an automated strike zone, right? He's got a great arm, he's got great athleticism, but there is question about his ability to catch a little bit. And so there's been talk about him playing second and center field. My comp was Dalton Varsho. I think the power speed at having catcher eligibility is going to become a thing, and it's hugely valuable at catcher especially if you can play other positions. My last sentence in my write-up of Harry Ford is it's a starter kit for a 2020 catcher with multi-positional eligibility. But what this brings me to, and I'd like to talk about this a little bit if we can, is we're now seeing the catcher position being approached very differently by some teams than it has been historically, right? Historically, it's a plotter at catcher that's going to catch until their knees fall off, and that's the position they play. But we see Dalton Varsho, we see MJ Melendez now playing right field, right? There was some talk about him taking some reps at third last year. He's playing a couple days at third, a couple days at DH, a couple days at catcher. And then with the DH now in the National League as well, I think we'll see players who traditionally or historically may have been moved off of catcher maintain that catcher eligibility and become either the second or the third catcher on their team. it means a catcher like Tyler Soderstrom may be able to stay at catcher a bit, even though defensively he's a minus, because he has a little bit of ability to do it. That to me adds value, right? From a fantasy perspective, that, Aaron, you talk a lot about positional flexibility and really valuing the players on your team having it. And so imagine Harry Ford as a 2020 potential catcher in 2025, who can also play second and center field, right? That's like the dream Brandon Young, Aaron Alvis player, essentially. So for me, I get the proximity part. We've talked about this a lot. Do you want to use your minor league spots on a player with lower ceiling but proximity, or a player with higher ceiling but that's in A-ball, right? Or in the Dominican League? I think that's a philosophical conversation that we can each have. But Ford is my number 3 because I don't see another catcher on here capable of 20 steals and capable of playing so many positions. Currently he's at 18.5% walk rate and a 26.6% K rate in A-ball and 173 plate appearances. 18.5% isn't going to hold, but even if it's 14, if it's 13 with that kind of speed, I think that's incredibly valuable. One other thing I liked about him is that he has a really balanced ground ball, fly ball percentage currently. And so he seems to me like a catcher that's out of like a central casting in some ways, even though he's 5'10", because he's fast, he's power, he doesn't hit the ball in the air too much, he doesn't hit the ball on the ground too much, and he can take a walk. And yes, he's a Mariner, but that didn't influence me putting him in. I knew that was coming from.
I brought him up first.
In answer to your comment about the changing catcher position, I would put that as, I would kind of tier it. Mm-hmm. So I think I still would hold to the traditional elite catcher, which we haven't seen in a while, right? Mm-hmm. But I would have that category first. So for me, that's where the potential of an Adley or an Alvarez would be. And then these type of hybrid catchers you're talking about in that rank, and then kind of the occasional all-star catcher in tier 3. So I think it's a great point. The beautiful thing about him is obviously the speed here, right? Kind of the Barshow-esque 2020 potential.
I love that you bring that up, and I think even though the framing and stuff may going by the wayside, I still, that romantic and I think very real idea of the catcher being the leader of the team, or being a leader on the team, and being someone that strategically still has an important role to play. I lost my catcher one this week to another injury. I read an article by C. Trent Rosecrans and just talking about, like, they call him the quarterback of the team, he being Tyler Stevenson. Like, he is the leader. He's the leader in the huddle, and he's the one that speaks up at meetings. He's the one who sets the tone. And I love that idea of that catcher. So again, I know that we're moving away from the defensive element focus, but I still think, to your point, there are intangibles, there are game calling, there's still elements to playing that position that are special and unique in the game.
Are we sure it's not Tommy Pham?
And I think your comment there has a lot to do with playing time as well, right? So, and the team's commitment to that catcher. But at the same time, I think it does affect evaluation. So the catchers that I'm going to mention, are all on my teams now, besides Davis. So just as far as you all calling out my bias here, I'll just say
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, but Adley has a lot of those intangibles, and I think that affects the way he's ranked and viewed, right? So for me, I think Alvarez could be the one catcher fantasy baseball in the future ahead of Adley, because of that intangible piece that is attached to Adley. I think he has better hitting metrics, better qualitative evaluations by scouts. Alvarez does. I see them both as potential elites, but I think that intangible piece does affect the way, and the defensive piece does affect the way catchers are evaluated. And I think that's a key piece for fantasy baseball as well, as far as discerning that when it comes especially to prospects.
One other additional thought with regards to the position and your tiers. the kids from a dynasty perspective, the catcher exclusive players may peak and it may fall off their peak quicker because of the wear and tear on their bodies, right? That's one of the attractions to me of like MJ Melendez is if he's playing in the field some, he's not going to wear down in the same way that a traditional catcher might, right? Catchers are few and far between that can maintain this really long career of peak offensive production because their bodies get beat up so badly. And so for me in dynasty leagues, that's something that I do consider, right? Is how well are their bodies going to hold up over time? And is this a player that I want to invest, I want to see as my catcher for the next 5 years or next 7 years? That is my one worry with Alvarez. Alvarez is my number one, but that is my worry about him is that he's currently listed at 5'10", 233. And if he's squatting up and down over and over again with that amount of weight on his knees, given his frame, is he going to break down quickly, right? Is he going to peak at 24 and then at 26 it's kind of downhill from there because of the build and the catching.
Help there with NL. So
the other part of the conversation is now that the NL has a DH, is that catcher's bat good enough for the team to DH that catcher when they're not actually catching? So if Alvarez is catching 4 days a week and DHing 3 days a week, then that's great, right? Or 4 and 2. But if he's catching 6 days a week, I'm telling you right now, I'm not trusting that guy past 25 years old. I'm just not.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do think all of these things are really interesting, kind of under the radar filters that are needed to evaluate the catcher position moving forward. So
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, what's that?
Can I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
Can we all go around starting with you, just recapping our top 5 and then maybe highlighting one player or that we either haven't talked about real quick or
Sure.
Something that you want to add about your list and
Sure.
then move on to open forum?
Yeah, absolutely. What's your, why don't you start us, Aaron?
I wanted you to start. You haven't gotten to really share much of your list, but I can
Okay.
go if you really want me to.
So I have Francisco Alvarez at 1. The weight is a worry. The power is not. His 50% pull rate is a little bit of a worry for me right now, but I do think he settles in as a 260, 350, 450, 25 home run catcher on average with the potential for 30 home runs down the road. I think the elimination of the shift will help him because he's such a pull hitter. I do think he's going to be a star. I don't know if he's going to be a superstar, but he certainly is my number one. My comp statistically for him is Carlton Fisk. Slower middle of the order bat. Fisk career 269, 341, 457 with 376 home runs. My number 2 is Gabriel Moreno. I know the question right now is about his power. I don't know if his power is going to come, but his game is not predicated on speed. And so if he is able to add weight and good weight, I do think he can add a little bit of power just with strength. Currently, I see him as a 290 hitter, maybe even a 300 hitter with 15 or so home runs and a good walk rate. He also, context-wise, he's playing in Toronto with a really good offense. I think for runs and RBIs, that could help him, but I also think it could hurt him because he may not get above hitting number 7 in the order for the next 3 or 4 years. My comps for him, I said if he reaches his power and offensive potential, you can dream on Buster Posey or Victor Martinez because he has that kind of hit tool. If the power doesn't develop, think Jonathan Lucroy. My number 3 was Harry Ford. My number 4 was Henry Davis. And my number 5 is Diego Cartaya of the Dodgers. Cartaya, I don't question his ability as much. I think a peak Cartaya season would be 260, 375, 475 with 25 homers, which is good enough to be a top 5 catcher in fantasy. My question with Cartaya is that he's blocked by Will Smith, right? And Will Smith is the catcher of the future with the Dodgers. And I don't know that Will Smith is going anywhere anytime soon, right? He's a leader on the team. He's hitting third at times, or he was hitting third, or excuse me, cleanup at times. And so if Cartaya is to be a star and to play for the Dodgers, I don't really know where they're going to put him. I know the Dodgers believe in depth, but I don't know if we'll see him get 450 at-bats, for the next couple of years. And so is that a player that I want to roster if I know that that's going to be the case for him? My comp for him was a right-handed Bob McCann. Again, a player that's steady and provides some power. Out of this list, I don't know that I see any superstars. I think that that Alvarez is the surest, I think, to be a really good fantasy asset, and that Ford is the one who has the most upside fantasy-wise because of the speed. So that's my top 5. I also did consider Tyler Soderstrom for this list, but there's so much question about whether he remains a catcher, and he's really struggled this season that I left him off.
Cool. All right, I'll go next, Matt, and you can finish up real quick for me. So yeah, as I mentioned, Bo Naylor was a slight miss. Ford at 5, Austin Wells at 4, Francisco Alvarez at 3, Diego Cartaya at 2, and Henry Davis at 1. The player I want to highlight was Diego Cartaya, who Tino just talked about. My Podmates fashion, I'll say he's 6'1", 200 pounds, because I love it when you get height and weight. So I'm trying to get in the habit of giving that. Excuse me, 6'2", 200 pounds. But he's currently at high A. I love what he's doing in the minors. He just got a promotion. He actually leads this position at hard hit rate so far this year at a 43.6%. And despite being 20 in high A, he is walking 14% of the time. His raw power is 60. I love that he's walking. There is some swing and miss. I think I would expect that with a power hitter of his age. And a lot of this comes down to my trust in the Dodgers, in their ability to coach, give information, and get the most out of power plate approach. So I see that as an advantage. I think if we're going to roster Michael Busch and Vargas and all these other players in their system, to me, it wouldn't stop me from rostering Cartaya, hoping that his talent emerges. Matt?
Okay, so I have obviously Alvarez at 1, Campusano at 2, Marino at 3, Cartaya at 4, and of course Davis at 5. We talked a lot about Alvarez already. I just wanted to highlight his 90 EV last year at age 19 in high A. Hard hit this year, 35.8. 27% K, which is high compared to last year, 10% walk. His contact rate is in the 70s this year, 80 last year in high A. But again, you're talking about a 20-year-old at double A. And as far as the elite contact goes, you know, even in the spring, at spring training, he had a 98.7 mile an hour fastball, 109 miles per hour, 441 feet off pro pitching as a 20-year-old. So he does have that elite potential. There is that question of pull, but again, scouts are saying that his bat is so quick, that's naturally going to happen with a hanger or something over the middle of the plate. And scouts are quite confident that he does have the bat speed and the skill with the strike zone, with the zone itself to go opposite way. In fact, when he was first evaluated, they said he has center to right power. It just hasn't been a piece of his game yet, because he is, as a young player with bat speed, that's going to be pull happy. The one I need to justify probably is Campusano at number 2. He's in AAA right now. I think he has had kind of a bad hand dealt with him. In 2020, he was one of those players that was rumored to have this elite bat speed, this elite EV in San Diego. And I think there was pressure for them to bring him up when they were having issues with catcher. So he was very premature when he came up. And that's hard for a catcher at that young of an age, because there's so much to think about as a catcher. So I don't think his performance, which the metrics aren't bad, the stats are, but the metrics aren't bad. His performance at the MLB level is unfair to evaluate. And plus he didn't get daily at bats. So this year he's 32.7 hard hit rate, 15% K rate, 10% walk rate, and his contact rate is 83% in San Diego. I know there's a park factor there, obviously, at AAA in San Diego, he has been consistent. Their A-ball parks are actually lower when it comes to park factors than once they get to AAA. So he's been consistent all throughout. He's always held an OPS 900 or above. And the one thing I want to say that I think is unfair that comes up in just about every evaluation is his felony marijuana possession bust that happened in the South as a person of color, and I think that does affect the way he is viewed by analysts. So Moreno, I have at 3, and I called Moreno Adley light because he has the Adley hit tool, but he does not have the Adley power. And my big question is that, right? Is that power going to come?
Wait, does Adley have power?
I think there's qualitative power there, yes, in his swing, and
I agree. I'm just
being a smart ass there too. but it's not just it's OPS. So OPS 784 coming in. Adley's been consistently over 900 throughout, right? So that's a huge difference there. His EV is at 89. Contact rate is 80, which is nice. But my biggest question is his power. He does have that line drive swing, which is going to affect that. But he's coming up with 1 home run in Buffalo. So is that power going to translate? And if it does, like you say, he can be elite if he brings that power up, especially in a park like Toronto and in the AL East. But I have big questions about his power. Cartaya, who I own in other leagues besides ours, Aaron has him in ours. I have at 4. I call him an Alvarez light. His EV is not as elite. It was 89. He does have that hard hit at 43.6%, but my biggest concern here is the contact rate. So he's ranging from 66 to 52, and we're talking about A ball. So I think that should be a concern there. The Dodger system obviously is not, and his OPS is not a concern at all, consistently over 900. So yeah, that's where I'm at with these guys. So as far as tiers go, I see Alvarez in his own tier. I see Campusano in his own tier, lower than Alvarez, but he does have the loud contact and power that Moreno does not have. And Moreno kind of in his own tier, and then Cartaya and Davis in their own tier together, just because of the proximity issue, and I want to see them in AA before I make any further evaluation.
Can I ask a strategy question, Matt?
Sure.
We talked quite a bit on the catcher preview about roster construction and carrying 2 catchers, and something Tino and I think and I have talked about a couple of times, and managing our head-to-head strategy. I think having you on the pod today, you're in a unique position with your build. I'd be interested to get your perspective as you look forward to the competitive cycle with the roster that you have, having Adley and Alvarez. Do you foresee yourself, without giving any competitive advantage away, like in your ideal scenario,
okay,
do you see yourself, pardon me?
I was saying that's okay. He can give it away. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Didn't mean
I could care less about that.
Do you see yourself carrying 2 elite catchers, or are you just hoping that one of them becomes what you hope they will be, so that you will have 1 elite catcher? Does that make sense? I'm just quoting.
I think it's both. So in a build, you got to take the percentages and say that some of these players aren't going to make it, right? So in a build, I think you have to have that depth position wise, especially early on, and see how these players develop. But with a catcher, I have the same bias towards catchers as you do. And again, even in real life, Gary Carter is the whole reason I'm here today, right? So I'm always looking for the next Gary Carter, which is never going to happen probably. But when it comes to catcher, I think there's a competitive advantage in having 2 elite, not only for your team, but if there's like 4 elite catchers in the league, I don't want anybody else to have them. I'll keep them on the bench. I don't want another team that, especially in head-to-head, to have an elite catcher when I could hold on to him and keep them away from a team that I'm competitive with, especially when we're looking at how we're going to match up week to week and then eventually in the playoffs. So I would love to have those two catchers in the playoff if they come up the way they are expected to, and somebody else being left with a mediocre catcher. It's going to give me a huge advantage.
Cool.
How does that impact both you guys? How does that impact the rest of your roster though? Because there is a negative impact on your flexibility with the rest of your roster.
Well, I think if you have flex players, that helps. It depends on your pitching philosophy and what you're doing with WHIP, ERA, and then the counting stance with Ks, and how you're going to balance wins and losses there as well, as far as how many pitchers you're going to keep. But to me, I have no problem keeping 12 to 14, having 12 to 14 hitters and only 11 to 13 pitchers. And so I think that allows for building depth and hitting. Plus catchers get hurt, right? And so that's where depth is important as well.
It would help too. I think splitting the difference, it would help if at least one of those catchers had multi-positional eligibility, like we were talking about. I think that would change the calculus quite a bit, to borrow your phrase, Aaron. I love that phrase. I listened to it a couple of different times when you used it on the previous pod. All right, are we done with catchers here?
Yeah, I think so.
I love that there's like very little consensus. I think but it's all based on research and thought. It's a fun one. You don't hear that often where people actually have disagreements about stuff like this.
Yeah, and shout out to RotoWire for having batted ball data for minor leaguers. I think that makes this analysis for me a lot more fruitful and enjoyable.
Yes, absolutely.
And I pray for Savant to come into the minors and give us access to that data as well.
I'm sure it's coming soon. All right, open forum. You want to lead us off, Aaron? Sure.
My question is, if you have one to share, and if you don't, that's perfectly fine. What baseball, non-fantasy baseball activity, whether it be a sim, a game, a book, scorekeeping, like what is there something you're doing this season that you're enjoying to either increase your enjoyment this season, or tangentially with baseball that's you're really enjoying that's outside of what we do for our fantasy leagues?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I've shared, I work in the evening, and which is prime baseball viewing time. And so my habit is to get home from work and spend a few hours winding down and watching the condensed games. And I'm really thankful. I remember they used to try to do, MLB.com used to do or TV used to do a condensed game thing even 15 years ago, but it wasn't edited in the same way that it is now. And so I'm super thankful for that. And so that's one thing that I do daily, or weekdays at least. Weekends are definitely watch as much baseball as possible. And then the other one is, yes, I do play MLB The Show, and I currently have a dynasty team on MLB The Show that I play in some of my downtime.
Cool.
What about you, Matt?
So one is connected because of fantasy baseball, but something I'm enjoying and that I can enjoy outside of it, because my team's in a build. I watch a lot of minor league baseball, and that's been total pleasure. I need to go down to Tacoma. I want to go to Eugene at some point as well, before Luciano goes up to Richmond. But yeah, it's just a joy to watch these games just because it's so intimate. I like the fun activities. They don't go to commercials, so you see the in-between activities, minor league ball. So I just like the whole atmosphere of watching these games and watching players develop, right? And then seeing kind of the Bull Durham-esque player, the 30-year-old player that's still there, taking leadership and knowing that he's not going to probably go to the majors, but seeing maybe that catcher out there developing the young pitcher. So to me, you don't get that in any other sport. And as far as other stuff goes, I do want to get back to APBA, or other people call it what, APA, the dice game. I did get the computer version. It's boring. It's fun with dice, and I learned so much about math growing up with that game, because you have to calculate, pitcher's arms versus, outfielder's arms as a runner's trying to go to third, subtract in your head really quick in order to play the game quick. So I'm a humanities guy. So with my humanities, other humanities teachers, they're always complaining about math, but I love math because of growing up, and I can calculate things quickly, not because I have the smarts, just because I grew up with doing the calculations that now computer sim does for us. So I want to go back to actually having the dice and making those calculations in my mind. So I look forward to, if ever there's free time, to playing that game again.
It's interesting you said that, just non-baseball related, but do you guys know the game Risk, where you have to roll dice for your we like to play that when the kids are home. It's a good group game. It's a long form game, kind of like Monopoly. It takes a while to play, but I had downloaded a battle calculator where you could put in, this is how many armies I have, this is how many armies you have, this is how many dice I'm gonna roll. It would calculate all the battles, and I thought, oh, this will be great. As we get to the end of the game, when you're putting 20, 30 armies down at a time, you're turning in your fourth and fifth set of cards, you're getting 30 armies at a time. It takes a long time to roll that out. But we played it, and like everyone's like, I hate this. Like, it saves time, but it's not the same as like rolling it out. So it made me think of that when you said the computer version's boring.
Aaron, what are you doing baseball wise outside of fantasy and dabbling in a podcast?
Yeah, two things I would share. One is being on the East Coast for some of my life. I made it a goal this summer to see ballparks. So I've been to PNC and I've been to Citizens Bank. I'll be in Baltimore next month. I also want to get to AA Altoona and AAA Harrisburg. I'll have dates set aside for those as well. So that's one thing non-fantasy related I'm doing. I love PNC. It's been my favorite so far. I've only been to 2, but I can't wait to go back there. Had an amazing time there. And then the other thing is I've been getting the siren call for OOTP 23. It was released last month. I keep looking at it. I keep holding it at arm's bay. With the position our TGFBI team is in, with Fantrax, with this podcast, with the fact that Amelia is going to be home next week, I just don't want to get into it right now because of the time it's going to take. But I'm just really eager to get back in that game. But the timing doesn't feel right. So that's kind of what Jim made me want to ask the question of, because it's something that I'm thinking. Yeah, so like I said, I'm really eager to get back into the version of the game. It looks like they really improved the graphics, and but the timing doesn't feel right with all my commitments right now with baseball. But some point here in the future.
It's hard to keep it at arm's length.
It is
really hard. It's really that I do the same with MLB The Show. But there have been years where I'll buy it and then not open it, or years where I'll get it and then I have to I resist it as long as possible because I know once I start, it's hard to stop. And I wanted to add, I had the exact same experience with, it used to be called Pursue the Pennant, and now it's Dynasty Baseball. Same idea, card, three 10-sided die, cards that were with results based on probability. And actually, we should do a pod on just our sim experiences. I think that would be really fun. But I got it, the online version, because I thought I could play with friends, and it just wasn't remotely the same. I think you guys are spot on. Mm-hmm. Matt, you got an open forum question?
Well, mine was similar. So I had the APA one as far as sims go.
Cool.
And I think the most obvious stupid question that I've asked in the last 6 months, I'm going to ask now is, J-Rod on your Dynasty team for the show?
On my Dynasty team?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
That's almost the type of question that would piss you off.
He was my second round pick.
Not your
One-
first round. I would have thought if he wasn't there with your first pick, you would just hit restart and just do it
Oh,
again.
yeah, I think you did
Just
that.
hit
I
restart
have-
and do it again until you got him, and they're like, all right, now we can go.
So I've done that with in previous years, picking Moncada and trying to. I should not even admit this. So I'll pick, and I'll target where I think Moncada will go, and if I don't get him in that round, I'll reset it. And then if I go a bunch of times, usually it's like fourth or fifth round. And if I don't get him, then I'm like, okay, he's not going to fall to the fifth round ever. So stop resetting it and just pick him in the fourth. But yes, 100% I'm guilty of doing that. 100%. You're spot on.
I'll give a shout out to Springfield Isotopes here, or whatever, Chico's bail bonds. We grew up together since kids, and we did play these games. But there is a funny story there. We drafted teams with APBA, and we were playing. And I think I was playing his brother, and I did kind of a half effort dice roll, and I got 66, which is a home run for Gary Carter. And my two other friends, Spring, one of them, had to do kind of a replay thing on whether I rolled the dice properly. And they ruled against me, and I was young, so I started to cry and I started to swear, and his dad was outside our room and calling me out on swearing and wondering what was going on in the room and stuff. But it was interesting that even before instant replay, we had an instant replay on dice roll.
It's so ridiculous. I know we were under the gun with time. I have one related story that is one of my favorite stories ever, kind of like that. So my best friend in high school, Jason Chan, and we had this huge, this is all we did was baseball and video games, right? And played ball. But spring break, I think it was senior year spring break, he had previously helped one of his mom's friends build a cabin in Cannon Beach. And so we were going to Cannon Beach for a week, right? During spring break. We were super excited to go. He drove his own car. I drove with him. His mom had her car. We're going to go to the beach. We're going to go like talk to girls. We're going to go have a blast. But we also took our Stratomatic baseball. We were playing Stratomatic at the time. And we get there and we're about to sit down and play first day. And we're like, where's the dice? I thought you brought the dice. And it was like, I thought you brought the dice. We were so heartbroken that we're going to spend an entire flipping week in Cannon Beach with no Stratomatic. So me being like the fiend and the dumbass that I am, I said, here's what we're going to do. And I took a sheet of paper and I tore numbers out of the sheet, wrote the numbers in there and tore them off into little pieces of paper. And we put them in a bucket or whatever it was, a bag. And we reached in 3 times and pulled numbers from each bag to represent the dice rolls. So we wanted to play it so bad that we created dice out of paper and reached into bags to get our results. The other thing is, the only place in Cannon Beach that we saw the entire week was A&W root beer, burgers, whatever it is. We did not go to the beach. All we did was play Stratomatic, reaching for the numbers out of a paper bag the entire freaking week. That's true story. So I guess we should have known we were all going to be baseball basically addicts at that point in time. It was totally ridiculous. I have a quick question if we have time for that.
Yep.
What is each of your favorite guilty pleasure foods?
I think for me, it's ice cream.
Mm-hmm. You have a favorite?
Chocolate with coffee grounds on top, not from the garbage.
It's dirty. I love it.
No, I'm vegan, so all my ice cream is plant-based. The 2 brands I like to look for as Oatly has the best.
Yeah.
It's really, really smooth. And Not a Moo is also really good. But if you've never tried plant-based ice cream, you really can't tell the difference. Yeah, I'm pretty straightforward. I don't like the Chunky Monkey and the rainbow and all that stuff. I like just either chocolate or vanilla, and I like put some fresh fruit on it, or or like I said, some coffee grounds. And I'll just have like a little bit. Yeah.
Awesome.
For me, it's Oreo cookie ice cream. I dream of Oreo cookie ice cream.
Do you really?
Literally, yeah. Especially because I try to have a decent diet, so I only have it so much, and so when I haven't had it in a while, I will dream about it. But it can't be this phony shit where you just have from like Burger King where it's just the crumples. It needs to be the freaking chunks, right? It needs to be that big chunk of cookie in there. So
Yeah.
so
Get out here.
Baskin Robbins does it the best, where it's like the real cookie. And my kids, bless them, every birthday or Father's Day, they'll go buy real Oreo cookies and then mix them in with the ice cream for me. So
Wow, handmade. That's amazing.
Awesome. Aaron, I'm right there with you. This is not my guilty pleasure, but one scoop of chocolate ice cream on a wafer cone is probably my favorite dessert. Just plain. I don't need any of the other bullshit. Certainly not used coffee grounds, but like, yes, one scoop of chocolate ice cream is amazing. My guilty pleasure is hands down fried chicken. My father ate fried chicken. He couldn't drive past a Popeyes without stopping. My grandfather ate fried chicken almost every day for lunch, and I would eat it every single day all the time. It's absolutely my favorite thing to eat, and it's a guilty pleasure, but I can't say no for sure. Man, this was great having you on, Matt. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was.
It's wonderful to see this evolve. I was thinking back. This is a shout out to both of you. Over, I think it was in the fall when we were looking at kind of our records and fan tracks and saying, well, we've got to get better. You two, I think, definitely have taken a different route. I'm completely doing a rebuild, but shout out to both of you being 1 and 2 right now, and just seeing how your strategy has developed over the course of the past 6 months, along with this pod, has been great to see. But I take no pleasure in me being down below and you being 1 and 2. But I'll be visiting you soon.
Nice. I actually wanted to. I was planning on saying some different pod, but I think that what I've learned from Aaron and hopefully vice versa is, I think that part of our success in all the leagues that we're in is due to having these conversations and learning from one another. And I think that we've really accelerated our learning by doing the research for the pod, but also by sharing ideas and not always agreeing and incorporating each other's perspectives into how we approach. And I don't think it's coincidence that we're succeeding this year. I really don't. I think it's a product of the others, experience and intelligence, but also the connection. So Aaron, I love this. I think it's, the pod will continue to grow, but I certainly appreciate through a third of the season, the fantasy baseball success as well.
I've learned an immense amount from you both in different areas. And I think, in terms of our collaboration, there's a saying that and when you're uncomfortable, that's when the growth happens. And I think when you're trying to collaborate on a decision, there's some discomfort there on both sides when it's not a unilateral decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those conversations have made me a better player and a better assessor for sure. And just, I think having the commitment as well to show up and try to bring good content as well, and in the scouting aspect of it. And I think, Matt, I've learned so much from you head to head, and just both you putting up with my bullshit when I'm an emotional wreck and telling me to calm down, but also just when I ask them questions, you always are willing to be honest with me and give your perspective. It'd be easy for you to be cagey or anything like that, but you've always been not just, I wouldn't say encouraging, just telling me what I want to hear, but also saying yes, that may suck, but here's why it is that way, or here's another way to look at it.
Right.
And that helps me grow beyond and start to really embrace it. And I think the success I've been fortunate to have this year, it's kind of some of that coming together of me handling the roster and making decisions in a different way than I would have in the past, because I really changed my perspective on it.
Well said. Awesome. Thanks a lot, you guys. It was really good. Really good to see you, Matt.
Yeah, go Hunter Green.
That's right, Hunter Green Day.
Always.
All right,
Hey,
take it easy.
Talk soon.
See you guys.